Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're totally decoding one of the most widespread, yet honestly, frequently misunderstood metabolic conditions on the planet, diabetes. We hear the word all the time, right? But the actual mechanics of what's happening inside the human body, they are absolutely fascinating and frankly, absolutely vital for all of us to understand. To really put the sheer scale of this into perspective, just take a look at this number. More than 40 million Americans, that's roughly 1 in 8 people, are living with diabetes right now. And beyond the human toll, which is huge, the economic impact is just staggering. We're talking a $640 billion cost to the U.S. healthcare system in 2021 alone. It's a massive systemic issue. So it's a true epidemic. But to truly grasp what goes wrong in the body, we first have to ask a pretty fundamental question. What actually happens when your finely tuned biological engine starts to break down? Like, how does a system perfectly designed to keep you energized suddenly turn into something that damages your organs? All right, Section 1, the baseline, how insulin normally works. Okay, before we can understand the disease itself, we've got to examine how your body's energy system operates when absolutely everything is running smoothly. Think of it like this perfect, elegant, step-by-step process. First, you eat a meal, and your digestive tract breaks down those carbs into a simple sugar called glucose. As that glucose hits your bloodstream, your blood sugar levels naturally rise. This spike sends a direct signal to a specialized organ sitting right behind your stomach, your pancreas. The pancreas is like, got it, and responds by releasing the hormone insulin into circulation. Finally, that insulin travels to your cells and basically opens the door, allowing them to absorb the glucose to use for energy. I actually love this analogy from the CDC, because it perfectly simplifies the whole mechanism. Insulin is a key. Without that crucial key, the glucose is essentially locked out. It just floats uselessly in your bloodstream, bumping against closed doors, while your cells literally starve for the energy they desperately need to function.
Moving on to Section 2, the system breakdown. What is diabetes?
So this is where the biological engine starts to stutter. The system breakdown often begins with something you've probably heard of, insulin resistance. Imagine having the key, but the lock is completely jammed. Your cells start ignoring the insulin. And because the sugar can't get in, your blood sugar just stays high. Your pancreas senses this and kind of panics, pumping out more and more insulin to force those doors open. Over time, your pancreas simply can't keep up with the massive demand, and the whole system becomes completely bottlenecked.
Section 3, categorizing the breakdown, type 1 versus type 2.
Now, when the body's engine fails like this, it generally happens in one of two distinct ways. Type 1 is an autoimmune condition. For reasons we still don't fully understand, the body's own immune system attacks and destroys the insulin-producing factories in the pancreas, meaning the body makes zero insulin, none. Type 2, on the other hand, which accounts for a massive 90 to 95% of all cases, is more of a gradual issue. It's the insulin resistance we just talked about, where the body doesn't use insulin well, and eventually the pancreas just gets totally exhausted and can't make enough. Oh, and we definitely should also note a third primary category, gestational diabetes. This is a temporary breakdown that happens in some pregnant women whose bodies just can't produce enough insulin to handle the increased demands of pregnancy. Now, while it usually goes away after birth, it acts as a major flashing warning sign. It significantly increases the risk of both the mother and the child developing type 2 diabetes later down the road. That brings us to Section 4, the danger, risks of high blood sugar. The absolute crucial point here is that regardless of the specific type of diabetes, the end result is exactly the same. The sugar stays locked in the blood rather than entering the cells, and that leads to a highly dangerous state, clinically known as hyperglycemia. It happens when excess glucose just builds up in the bloodstream instead of fueling your muscles, liver, and tissues. When blood glucose levels cross that threshold of 15 millimoles per liter, well, the blood essentially becomes toxic to the body's own systems. But how do you actually know if this is happening to you? Well, Diabetes UK provides us with a highly memorable way to spot the immediate acute warning signs of this breakdown. They call it the 4 T's. Because your body is desperately trying to flush out that toxic sugar, you find yourself going to the toilet frequently. This massive fluid loss makes you incredibly thirsty. Because your cells are starved of their fuel, you feel uncharacteristically tired. And finally, your body starts burning fat and muscle for energy instead of sugar, leading you to get thinner without even trying. Now, if these warning signs are ignored, particularly in people with undiagnosed type 1 diabetes, it can rapidly escalate into a terrifying medical emergency called diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. Because the body is completely starved of insulin, it rapidly breaks down fat for energy, which releases these acidic chemicals called ketones right into the blood. This is marked by nausea, confusion, shortness of breath, and a very distinct, almost fruity-smelling breath. And to be clear, it requires immediate emergency room treatment, no exceptions.
Let's look at Section 5, the cascading damage, long-term complications.
If the blood sugar remains perpetually high over a period of years rather than just days, it builds into catastrophic long-term damage. Because the cells can't absorb the sugar, the toxic excess acts almost like microscopic shards of glass in the bloodstream, progressively damaging the delicate walls of your blood vessels and nerves. And this creates a devastating cascading effect. It damages the vessels in your eyes, leading to blindness. It destroys the tiny filters in your kidneys, leading to failure and dialysis. It ruins your nerves, particularly in the feet, meaning a tiny cut goes unnoticed, gets severely infected, and can ultimately lead to lower limb amputations. And yeah, it also massively spikes your risk of heart attacks and strokes. Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, Maintenance and Repair, Management and Prevention. Now, I know that discussing complications like amputations and vision loss sounds incredibly alarming, but the really empowering news here is that we are absolutely not helpless. We have highly effective ways to repair, manage, and sometimes even overhaul this biological engine. You might naturally be wondering right now, can we actually stop this system failure before it causes permanent, irreversible damage to the body? Is remission even a real possibility? Well, for type 2 and prediabetes, the answer is a resounding yes. Lifestyle changes act as the ultimate mechanic here. When you engage in regular physical activity, you're literally forcing your muscle cells to become more sensitive to insulin. Losing excess weight takes a massive mechanical and chemical strain off your organs. And eating a balanced diet of non-starchy vegetables and lean proteins, that prevents those massive sugar spikes that exhaust the pancreas in the first place. These steps actually directly reverse insulin resistance. For those who do require medical intervention, especially those with type 1 who produce zero insulin on their own, modern medicine offers incredible, life-saving tools to basically perfectly mimic a healthy pancreas. We now have continuous glucose monitors that track your blood sugar in real time. We have routine A1C blood tests to measure long-term trends, and we have brilliantly engineered manufactured insulin, ranging from rapid-acting for meals all the way to long-acting formulas that keep a steady baseline for 24 hours, alongside a whole variety of pills that help lower resistance. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to take a second to reflect on the microscopic, beautifully elegant balancing act happening inside your own bloodstream right now. Your pancreas, your cells, your insulin, they are working tirelessly to keep you energized and alive. So ask yourself, what steps can you take today with your diet, your movement, and your health checkups to protect your own biological engine? Thanks for joining me, and keep feeding your curiosity.